He laughed when the bus broke down in the middle of nowhere. I wanted to scream. That was the first difference between us. He wore chaos like a second skin, and I had spent my whole life avoiding it. The night bus smelled like old vinyl and coffee gone sour, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes. A few passengers groaned, some cursed under their breath, but he just stretched his long legs into the aisle, tapped the guitar case with his boot, and smirked like the universe had done him a personal favor. "Guess we're all stranded together," he said to no one in particular. Then his eyes landed on me. That was the moment everything began. The Greyhound station had been my last refuge, the place I thought I could disappear into, swallowed by strangers and asphalt. I was running not from the law, not from debt, but from the version of myself I had never been allowed to be. My parents in Oklahoma would have called it shame. I called it survival. The night bus was supposed to carry me toward a quiet, invisible life in San Francisco. Instead, it handed me him. He slid into the empty seat beside me when the driver announced it would be an hour before they could fix the engine. I stiffened, my body instinctively folding inward. But he leaned in close enough for me to catch the faint scent of cigarettes and rain. "You always look this haunted," he said. "Or is it just a bad day?" I turned to him, ready to snap, but then I saw his eyes. They were a strange, impossible mix, defiant and tender, like he had been bruised by life but still believed in music, in hope, in second chances. He grinned, extending his hand. "Ethan." I hesitated. Then I took it. "Daniel." The bus eventually roared back to life, carrying us down the midnight highway again, but something between us had shifted. The neon reflections from passing gas stations painted his face in fleeting colors, and he started to hum under his breath, a melody so fragile I felt guilty for listening. "You a musician?" I asked. He tapped the guitar case like it was his only friend. "Yeah, or at least I used to be. Depends on who you ask." "What happened?" He looked out the window for a long time before answering. "Life. Mistakes. A girl who said I'd never be more than a guy singing in dive bars. Turns out, she was half right. There was something raw in the way he said it, something that made me want to peel back the layers of his laughter and see what hurt lived underneath. But I stayed silent. Hours passed, and the night grew heavier. The bus was nearly empty now, only the hum of the engine and the occasional cough of a fellow passenger. Somewhere between Nevada and dreams, Ethan turned to me again. "You believe in second chances, Daniel?" I froze. The question cut too close, too fast. "I don't know," I said carefully. "See, I do," he replied. His voice softened, almost breaking. "Even when the world says you don't deserve them. Even when you don't believe it yourself. Music gave me mine once. Maybe it still can. Maybe." His eyes locked onto mine. "Maybe someone else can too." It should have been terrifying, the way he looked at me like that. But instead, it felt like the first breath I'd taken in months. By dawn, we weren't strangers anymore. Or maybe we still were, but the distance between us had collapsed, filled by stories we swore we'd never tell anyone else. He confessed to sleeping in his car between gigs, to drowning in whiskey when the songs stopped coming. I confessed to hiding pieces of myself so deep even I sometimes forgot they existed. He laughed at my dry sarcasm. I laughed at his reckless optimism. And somewhere along that highway, in the rattling hum of an old bus, I realized I wasn't running from who I was anymore. I was running toward him. But of course, life doesn't hand you love without asking for blood first. That was the beginning. And like all beginnings, it carried both promise and disaster. The bus barreled west, headlights cutting through the endless dark like a promise neither of us fully trusted. By now, the other passengers had sunk into sleep, faces pressed against windows, headphones blocking out the world. But not us. Neither of us could close our eyes. Ethan strummed his guitar softly, the sound barely rising above the hum of the wheels. The notes were fragile, raw, the kind of sound that could unravel you if you weren't careful. I stared at his fingers moving across the strings, the way they shook slightly, betraying more than he probably wanted me to see. "Play something you wrote," I said, surprising myself. His eyes flicked to me, cautious, almost like he was waiting for ridicule. Then, slowly, he nodded. He shifted in his seat, cradling the guitar as if it were a fragile piece of himself, and began to play. The song was heartbreak woven into melody. Lyrics about losing yourself in someone else, about burning bridges just to watch the flames, about clawing at the ashes for a glimpse of what was lost. His voice wasn't perfect, it cracked at the edges, but that imperfection made it real, made it human. When he finished, silence stretched between us. The bus rattled. Somewhere in the back, a man snored. My chest ached in a way I hadn't expected. You ever thought maybe she was wrong? I asked. Who? The girl who said you'd never be more than a guy singing in dive bars. He chuckled, but it was hollow. She wasn't wrong about how the world sees me. Music doesn't pay rent. Love doesn't keep you fed. And maybe I just wasn't enough for her. I shook my head. No, she just wasn't enough for you. He looked at me then, really looked, like I had cracked something open he'd been trying to hold shut. His eyes softened, the corner of his mouth lifting in a smile that wasn't quite a smile. You're a strange guy, Daniel. Strange how? Like you see the parts of people they try to hide. And you don't flinch. I swallowed hard, turning to the window, pretending the desert night was more interesting than his words. If he knew the parts of me I had buried, the truth I had smothered under years of silence, maybe he wouldn't be smiling. Maybe he'd move to another seat. But he didn't. He stayed right there, close enough that our shoulders brushed every time the bus jolted over a pothole. By morning, the bus pulled into a dusty roadside diner somewhere in Arizona. The driver announced a 30-minute stop. Passengers shuffled off like sleepwalkers, stretching stiff limbs, lighting cigarettes, ordering greasy eggs and bitter coffee. Ethan slung his guitar over his back and turned to me. Come on, my treat. I frowned. You don't even know if I eat breakfast. Everybody eats breakfast, he said. It's America. If you don't, you're a communist. I laughed before I could stop myself. It startled me, that sound leaving my throat like it had been waiting years to escape. We slid into a cracked vinyl booth inside the diner, a jukebox humming old country songs in the corner. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and too much lipstick, took our order without looking up from her notepad. Ethan tapped his fingers against the table, restless. So, what's your story, Daniel? And don't give me that nothing to tell crap. Everyone's got a story. I stiffened. My story wasn't one you just spilled to a stranger in a roadside diner. My story was one that made people cross the street, that turned family into strangers, that left scars no one could see. But something about the way he asked, earnest, curious, without judgment, unraveled me. I grew up in Oklahoma, I said slowly. Small town, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. My dad worked at the mill. My mom stayed home. Church every Sunday. Football on Friday nights. The American dream, right? He nodded, waiting. I never fit. I tried, but I always felt like I was walking around in someone else's skin. Like the real me was locked in a room I couldn't open without burning everything down. My throat tightened. I stared at the greasy menu to avoid his eyes. And when I finally cracked that door open, just a little, my dad slammed it shut. Told me if I didn't change, I wasn't his son anymore. Ethan's fingers stopped tapping. He leaned in, his voice low. He threw you out? I nodded once. I packed a bag that night. Haven't been back since. Silence stretched. The jukebox warbled a sad Hank Williams tune. My chest thudded with the familiar ache of remembering. But then Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. Just a touch, fleeting, but enough to send a jolt through me. Then he was wrong, Ethan said firmly. You don't need to change. Not for him. Not for anyone. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But belief was dangerous. Belief got you hurt. We climbed back onto the bus. The desert rolled by outside, endless and golden. Ethan dozed off, his head tipping toward my shoulder. I froze at first, every nerve screaming. But then, I let him stay. His breathing evened out, warm and steady, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I should have moved. I should have put the walls back up. But something inside me whispered, don't. Just this once, don't. So I didn't. The next days blurred together, gas stations, rest stops, small towns flashing by like postcards. We traded stories, jokes, silences that weren't uncomfortable. Ethan sang to me when the bus grew too quiet, and sometimes I caught myself smiling at nothing, the way kids do when they believe in magic. But magic doesn't last. On the third night, somewhere in California, a storm rolled in. Rain streaked the windows, thunder shaking the bus. Most passengers were asleep, but Ethan and I were wide awake. He turned to me suddenly. You ever think about how people like us don't get happy endings? I blinked. People like us? He held my gaze. Guys who feel the way we do. My pulse jumped. No one had ever said it out loud to me before, not like that. Not without spitting it like poison. I think about it, I admitted. My voice was barely a whisper. And I try not to. He studied me, his face illuminated by flashes of lightning. Then he leaned closer, his voice almost breaking. I don't want to just think about it anymore, Daniel. I want to believe in it. In us. In something. The bus jolted, thunder roaring overhead. And for a moment it felt like the world had collapsed into just us. Two broken men clinging to each other in the dark. I wanted to kiss him. God, I wanted to. But fear coiled inside me, sharp and cruel. Fear of what it would mean. Fear of who might see. Fear of everything I had spent my life running from. So I didn't. I looked away, and I felt him pull back. By morning, he was quieter. He still smiled, still joked, but something in his eyes had shuddered, and I hated myself for putting it there. We reached Los Angeles that afternoon, where half the passengers filed out, vanishing into the city's chaos. Ethan grabbed his guitar, slinging it over his shoulder. This is my stop, he said. The words hit harder than I expected. You're not going on to San Francisco? I asked. He shook his head. Got a friend here. Said he could hook me up with a gig. Might be nothing, but it's a chance. I swallowed. Right? Of course. He hesitated. Then, softer, come with me. The words hung between us, heavy and impossible. Ethan, just for a while. See the city. Hear me play. I don't know. I just don't want this to end on a bus. My heart lurched. Every instinct screamed to say no, to keep moving, to stay safe in the shadows. But another voice, the one that had laughed with him, the one that had leaned into his warmth, whispered, say yes. And for the first time in my life, I listened to that voice. Yes, I said. Ethan's grin was sunlight after a storm. And just like that, everything changed. That night we found ourselves in a dingy bar on the edge of downtown LA, neon lights flickering, smoke curling through the air. Ethan tuned his guitar in the corner, his hands steady now, like the music was the only thing that ever truly held him together. I sat at a table near the stage, nursing a flat beer, my nerves buzzing. When he began to play, the room shifted. His voice cut through the chatter, raw and magnetic, pulling everyone into his orbit. For 3 songs, it felt like the world belonged to him, to us, and when his eyes found mine mid-song, something in me shattered and rebuilt all at once. For the first time, I wasn't running. I was exactly where I wanted to be. But the world doesn't let love grow quietly. Not for people like us. And deep down, I knew the storm that had chased me from Oklahoma was still out there, waiting. Only now, it wasn't just me in its path. It was him too. The applause in that little bar was nothing compared to stadiums. But to Ethan it was oxygen. I could see it in his face as he came off stage, sweaty, beaming, alive in a way I hadn't yet seen. He dropped into the chair across from me, guitar still slung around his back, chest rising and falling like he'd just outrun the night. Well? He asked, grinning. I sipped my beer, trying to ignore the way my pulse had been thrumming since he first opened his mouth on stage. You were decent. Decent? He scoffed, pretending to be offended. That's it? After pouring my heart out in front of drunks and gamblers, I smirked. Fine. You were more than decent. His grin widened, the kind of grin that dared the world to say no. I'll take it. The bartender slid by, giving Ethan a nod of approval. A couple of women near the jukebox waved, clearly smitten. But Ethan didn't look at them. His eyes stayed on me, steady, unshakable. That gaze unsettled me, because for the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. After the bar closed, we wandered the streets of Los Angeles. Neon lights bled into puddles on cracked sidewalks. A hot dog vendor shouted at no one in particular. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed. Ethan's hand brushed mine once, twice. The third time, it stayed there. I froze, my whole body tightening like a trap had just sprung. Holding another man's hand in public wasn't something I had ever let myself imagine, let alone do. Every shadow felt like a threat, every glance like judgment. But then Ethan squeezed lightly, his thumb pressing against my knuckles. "Relax," he said softly. "It's just us." And somehow that was enough. We ended up on the rooftop of his friend's apartment, sitting side by side on the edge, the city sprawling beneath us like a restless dream. Ethan lit a cigarette, exhaled into the night. "You ever think maybe we're just running in circles? Like no matter where we go, the same ghosts follow us?" I didn't answer right away. I was too busy watching the way the city lights reflected in his eyes, the way the smoke curled around his lips. "Maybe," I finally said, "but maybe the point isn't to escape the ghosts. Maybe it's to find someone who doesn't mind sitting with you when they show up." He turned to me then, slow and deliberate, like the moment had been building since the bus. And when his lips met mine, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't chaos. It was quiet, soft. Promise whispered into the dark. I had never known a kiss could feel like safety. But safety is a fragile thing. The next morning, reality came knocking loud, relentless. Ethan's friend, a stocky guy named Marco, was sitting at the kitchen table when we came in from the rooftop. He looked between us, eyes narrowing just slightly, like he'd pieced together more than we wanted him to. "You did good last night," Marco said to Ethan. "Crowd liked you. Might be a regular spot if you want it." Ethan grinned. "See that, Daniel? My empire begins with cheap beer and sticky floors." Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Look, man, I don't care what you do in your own time, but be careful. People talk. This town eats guys alive for less than that." His gaze flicked to me. Heat crawled up my neck. I wanted to shrink into the floor, but Ethan didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling smoke. "Then let them talk." Marco shook his head. "Not how it works. You want gigs? You want respect? Keep it clean. Don't give them a reason to slam the door." The words lingered long after Marco left the room. Later, walking down a sun-bleached street, I finally said what had been clawing at me. "He's right, you know?" Ethan frowned. "About what?" "About people talking. About this." I gestured between us, my chest tight. "You think the world's just going to smile and clap while we do this?" His eyes hardened. "I don't care what the world does." "Well, I do," I snapped, louder than I meant to. "You don't get it, Ethan. You didn't grow up with a father who looked at you like you were dirt. You didn't have to hide every piece of yourself just to survive. You think I want to go through that again? You think I can?" Silence fell heavy between us. The city buzzed around us, but all I heard was my own ragged breathing. Ethan finally said, "Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't get it. But I know this." He stepped closer, his voice raw. "I know I feel alive with you in a way I haven't in years. And if that means I lose a gig or people whisper, then screw them. I'd rather have this than go back to feeling nothing." His words cracked something inside me, because I wanted that too. But wanting and surviving were never the same thing. That night I dreamed of Oklahoma, of my father's voice, sharp as broken glass. "You're not my son." Of my mother's silence, colder than any winter. I woke up drenched in sweat, Ethan's arm draped across me. For a moment, I almost pushed it away. Almost. But instead, I clung to it. Days turned into weeks. Ethan played more gigs. Some nights the crowds cheered. Some nights they barely listened. I stayed in the shadows, always watching, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it did. One night after a show, as we stepped outside, a group of men loitered by the alley. Drunk, the kind of men who smelled blood and went for it. "Hey!" One of them slurred, pointing at us. "Ain't you that fag singer from the bar?" The word hit like a stone. Ethan stiffened. I froze. Another one sneered. "Sing us a love song, sweetheart. Maybe kiss your boyfriend while you're at it." Laughter. Cruel, jagged. Before I could stop him, Ethan shot back, "Go to hell." That was all it took. One of them lunged, shoving him hard. Ethan staggered but stayed on his feet. I moved without thinking, grabbing his arm, pulling him toward the street. "Don't," I hissed. "Just walk." But the men followed, jeering, their voices louder than the city noise. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming danger. And then, flashing red and blue, a patrol car slowed, the men scattering like rats. The officer glanced at us, suspicious, but didn't stop. Only when the lights disappeared did I realize I was shaking. Ethan's hand squeezed my shoulder. "You okay?" "No," I whispered. "And neither are you. We argued that night. I told you not to mouth off." I snapped. "You think you're invincible, but you're not. One day it won't just be words, Ethan. One day it'll be worse." He glared at me, fire in his eyes. "So what, Daniel? We're supposed to bow our heads? Hide in the shadows so they feel comfortable? I'm done hiding. Some of us don't get to be done." I shouted. My voice cracked, raw and ugly. "Some of us don't get to choose." The room went silent. My chest heaved. Ethan's expression softened, but his voice was steady. "You do get to choose, Daniel. Maybe not what they think. Maybe not what they say. But you get to choose who you are. And right now, you're choosing fear." The words cut deeper than any insult ever had. Because he was right, and I hated him for it. For 2 days, we barely spoke. He played his gigs. I wandered the city, lost in my own head. Everywhere I went, I saw ghosts of who I'd been, who I might have been if I'd never left home. By the third night, I found myself back at the bar, sitting alone, waiting for him to take the stage. When he started to sing, the sound was different, rougher, heavier. His eyes never left mine, even as the crowd clapped along. And in that moment I understood, his music wasn't just music. It was a lifeline. And maybe, just maybe, so was I. After the show, he found me outside. We stood in silence for a long time, the city buzzing around us. Finally, I said, "I'm scared. I know. I don't know how to stop being scared." He reached for my hand. "Then let me be scared with you." And just like that, the wall I had spent years building began to crack. But love doesn't erase the world. And the world was still watching. The phone call came on a gray morning, the kind of morning where the city felt muted, hungover, restless. Ethan was still asleep, hair tangled, face half buried in the pillow. I almost didn't answer, but the number was familiar. Too familiar. "Daniel." My mother's voice cracked through the line. I froze. It had been 2 years since I'd heard her voice. 2 years since I'd packed a bag and walked away from Oklahoma, from the small town that never forgave me for existing. "I heard you're in California," she said. My mouth went dry. "How did you—" "Your cousin saw a picture online. A friend posted it. You were at some bar with a boy." Her voice dipped on the last word, trembling with both shame and accusation. My chest tightened. "His name is Ethan." Silence. Then sharper, "You need to come home. Your father's sick. He wants to see you." The words landed like stones. When I told Ethan, his eyes softened. "You should go." I shook my head. "You don't understand. If I walk back into that house, I'm 15 again. I'm every slur, every punishment, every look of disgust. I can't." He touched my hand. "Daniel, this isn't about them. It's about you. If you go, you're not that scared kid anymore. You're the man who survived. The man who chose to live. And if you need me, I'll be there." I wanted to believe him, But the thought of Ethan walking into that world with Mimi father's glare, the neighbors' whispers, was unbearable. Still, 2 days later, we were on a bus again. The same kind of bus where we'd met, only now, instead of strangers, we were something more. Something fragile, something the world might still try to break. Oklahoma hadn't changed. Same streets, same churches, same tired houses lined up like soldiers. My stomach clenched as we stepped off the bus. My father was waiting at the door, older, thinner, but his eyes still carried the same weight. My mother hovered behind him, wringing her hands. "You came," he said, his voice gravel. I swallowed. "Yeah." His gaze flicked to Ethan, standing just a step behind me, guitar case slung across his shoulder. "And you brought him." The air cracked. My instinct screamed to step away, to shrink back into obedience. But Ethan's hand brushed mine, steadying me. "He's with me," I said firmly. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch when my father's jaw tightened. The visit was uneasy. Conversations clipped, silences heavier than words. My father never acknowledged Ethan, not once. At dinner, he asked about jobs, about money, about the kind of life he thought I should be living. Finally, I snapped. "You wanted me here to see you, not to judge me." His fork clattered against the plate. "I wanted you here to remember who you are." "I know who I am," I shot back. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. For once in my life, I actually know. And if that means I'm not the son you wanted, then so be it. But I won't apologize for existing anymore. The silence afterward was deafening. My father's face twisted, torn between fury and something else, something that looked almost like regret. Ethan reached under the table, his fingers brushing mine. Strength surged through me. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, my father's coughing filled the house. My mother came to me, her face pale. "He doesn't have much time," she whispered. "Whatever you need to say it now." I hesitated at his bedroom door. Ethan waited in the hall, giving me a small nod. Inside, my father lay frail, smaller than I remembered. For the first time, he looked human, breakable. "I hated you for leaving," he rasped. "I hated you for making me," I replied. His eyes met mine, glassy with age. Maybe I was wrong. The words were small, fragile, but they cracked something inside me. I sat by his bed, not forgiving, not forgetting, but simply existing beside him. For the first time, that was enough. The funeral came weeks later. The town stared. Whispers followed news about me, about Ethan. But I didn't care. For the first time, I stood tall, Ethan's hand in mine, and I didn't care who saw. Afterward, we left Oklahoma behind again. Only this time, I wasn't running. Back in California, Ethan's music began to grow. A small label noticed him. Gigs turned into contracts, bar crowds into small theaters. But with recognition came pressure. His manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda, pulled him aside after a show one night. "You're talented," she said. "But you want to make it big? You've got to play the part. Clean image. No scandals. No distractions." Her gaze flicked to me. The meaning was clear. Ethan told me that night, his voice heavy. "They want me to hide, to pretend." My chest twisted. "And what do you want?" He looked at me, eyes burning. "You. Always you. But I don't know if I can have both the music and us." The words gutted me, because I knew what it meant to sacrifice. I knew what it meant to live half a life, and I wouldn't let him do it. "Then choose the music," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "Don't throw this away for me." His face crumpled. "Daniel, no," I whispered. "You deserve to shine. Even if I'm not beside you when you do." Felt like dying. But love, real love, was sometimes letting go. Weeks passed. Ethan's star rose. His name appeared on posters, his songs played on the radio. And I watched from the sidelines, heart aching, but proud. Then one night, a knock at my door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, drenched in rain, guitar strapped to his back. "They told me I had to choose," he said, voice shaking. "So I did. And I chose you." Before I could speak, he pulled out the guitar, strummed a chord, and began to sing. A song about buses and strangers, about second chances and holding on even when the world told you to let go. His voice cracked, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Tears blurred my vision. "You're insane," I whispered. He grinned through the rain. "Maybe, but I'm yours." And in that moment under the storm, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were living. Years later, when people asked how we met, we laughed. "On a night bus," Ethan always said, when I asked him if he believed in second chances. And I always answered the same way. I didn't then, but I do now. Because sometimes, against all odds, love finds you in the unlikeliest places. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to hold on, it saves you. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.